extremely humbled and flattered by the invitation to speak to you today. So thank you all for having me. And thank you for renting a DeLorean for my visit. I think maybe I should... I think maybe I should make this a requirement for all of my future speaking engagements. My contract will state that if I can't bring my own DeLorean, one must be provided for me. With a flux capacitor and Huey Lewis News CD, and also my dressing room, I want a bowl of M&Ms with all the green ones taken out. Does any of that sound reasonable? This is one of the moments in my life that I never dreamed would happen. I never imagined that I would be standing here addressing an entire class of incoming freshmen who were all sent a copy of my book and forced to read it over the summer. I'm sorry about that, by the way. The only thing worse than homework is homework that you have to do over the summer. If I'd known that Ready Player One would end up being assigned as a summer reading assignment, I probably would have felt so guilty I never would have written it. So, I followed a strange path to becoming a novelist. I started out as a screenwriter because I'd always wanted to make movies, and I grew up during the 70s and 80s in central Ohio, in a small town called Ashland, and from a very early age I was kind of obsessed with movies. That obsession began with Star Wars, but then it quickly grew into a love of all different genres of film. I remember I had a membership to every video store in my small town, and I would scour the shelves looking for movies that I hadn't already seen. And eventually I ended up getting a job at the largest video store I could find just so I could rent all of the movies for free, and I would take home like a giant stack of movies every night after work, and that was my film school. And eventually I got interested in learning how movies were made, and I read books on filmmaking. I listened to director commentary tracks and making of documentaries, and that was how I got interested in screenwriting. And I began to collect and study screenplays for my favorite films, and just to see how the original script differed from the finished product. And after reading hundreds of screenplays, I eventually worked up the courage to write my own screenplay, which was Fanboys. And I got the idea for Fanboys back in 1998. Kind of at the height of Star Wars prequel mania. Star Wars was the mythology of my whole childhood, so I was more excited than anyone to see this first new Star Wars movie in 15 years. I've been waiting my entire adult life to see this movie. I could not wait. I was working at an IT job at the time, and I was a terrible employee because I just spent all day at work looking at Star Wars websites for information about this movie. I was kind of obsessed. And my mother had died of cancer a few years before that, and that was still very much on my mind. And one day a strange idea, a kind of morbid idea popped into my head. What if I knew that I was dying and I wouldn't live to see episode 1 come out next May? Which struck me as the most ridiculous thought that I had ever had. Like, that's the main reason that you want to stay alive, to see some movie? But that thought also filled me with genuine fear. I'd been waiting to see this movie, you know, my whole life, and I asked myself what I would do if I was dying and I knew I wouldn't live to see this movie. And I decided that I would have to gather up my friends and drive across the country and try to break into Skywalker Ranch to see it early. And my next thought was that would be a great idea for a movie. So I immediately sat down and wrote it, and my plan was to try to make it as a low-budget independent film in Austin, Texas, where I live. I was really inspired by filmmakers like Kevin Smith and Richard Linklater, who had broken into the film industry by making small, low-budget movies like Clerks and Slacker, and that was my what I hoped to accomplish with Fanboys. But it didn't work out that way. The script was really well received by people who read it, and ended up being optioned by a producer in Hollywood who wanted to try and get it made as a much bigger Hollywood production. And by then, I figured out that I had no idea how to make a movie on my own, so I needed help. And that began kind of a long, strange year, a strange 10-year path. After like 10 years of ups and downs, finally Fanboys was made into a movie, a much bigger movie than I ever imagined, and a bunch of amazing young actors were cast in the leading roles. And Princess Leia and Lando Calrissian and Captain Kirk all made cameos in it, and I actually got to be an extra in a scene with William Shatner. It was just the most amazing thing that had ever happened, and my head kept exploding over and over again during all of this. And the strangest part of the whole Fanboy saga for me was when the movie was almost finished, and we got to do the final sound mix of the movie at Skywalker Ranch. So 10 years after writing this movie about breaking into Skywalker Ranch, I actually got to go to Skywalker Ranch and sit there in the editing room where they made all the Star Wars movies and watch them work on my little Star Wars movie. And while I was there, all of the Lucasfilm employees knew I had written this movie about breaking into Skywalker Ranch, so they kept joking with me not to steal anything while I was there. And I laughed it off, and then I stole everything that was not nailed down. Pens, phone books, silverware, any memento from Skywalker Ranch. I can fit in my backpack. Please, you're applauding theft. That's not good. Please don't tell anyone at Lucasfilm that I did that. So Fanboys was finally released in 2009, but by the time that it arrived on the big screen, the original story I'd written had been drastically altered, and the whole tone of the movie had changed. And this happens all the time to screenwriters, and it's one of the reasons screenwriting can be such a frustrating profession. Either your script never gets made into a movie at all, or it does get made, but then your story ends up getting warped and disfigured in the process. So, even though it was an amazing experience, my experience with Fanboys made me want to try writing a novel instead, because I wanted to see what would happen if I told a story with nothing between me and the audience. I wanted to geek out in my own unique way without any studio executives or anyone else telling me how to do it. And I had the original idea for Fanboys way back in 2001. I grew up reading a lot of fantasy and science fiction novels, but I was also a huge fan of Roald Dahl, who wrote James and the Giant Peach and the Willy Wonka